All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Friday, everybody's favorite day of the week, I think. There's no Monday. There's no Monday fans out there, are there? Monday? No, Monday's the worst. Monday's the worst. But yeah, today's Friday, so hopefully you have a fun and relaxing weekend planned before the sort of homework and tests and things kind of start to pile up, which of course they eventually will, but we don't have to think about that right now because it's only week one, right? So let's just enjoy where we are. I'm going to say hi to some people who are here online. So Ryan is here. Good morning to you, or good evening to you, I guess. Amanpreet's here. Hello. Hello to you. Good morning. Shania's here. Hello. Hello, Shania. Simrat's here. Hello. Good morning, Simrat. Azza is here. Good morning, Azza. And Abby is here. Good morning, Abby. And Sarah's here. Good morning, Sarah. So, yesterday we were talking about some kind of reasonably complicated stuff, but it was stuff that I wanted to introduce to you just so you have a bit of an idea of how we want to approach some of these social justice things. And I think sometimes it's kind of a piece of the puzzle that people are missing when they talk about social justice issues, is that they kind of are missing the idea that, like some of the things we've talked about, right? That your positionality, your kind of the social groups that you belong to in society, that affects, good morning, that affects the way that you perceive society, right? And of course it affects the way that society treats you, right? If you walk into a store and you're a giant 6'6" muscle-bound guy, then the staff is going to treat you a little differently than if you walk in and you're a small petite woman, right? There's, and I'm not saying any of this is right or it's the way it should be, but people react to you differently depending on who you are, right? I think that's kind of, we intuitively know that. And so again, positionality says that, people have different experiences of society. And for me to walk down the street, a white man in Vancouver, is perhaps very different from the experience that a black woman would have walking down the street, or a Muslim man, or anyone, any sort of combination of social identities. They're going to have a slightly different experience than me. And so we have to be open to the idea that sometimes things feel differently for different people, even if we can't feel them ourselves, right? One of the other things we talked about is the idea of knowledge being counterintuitive, right? Sometimes the things that we feel like are true or think are true or perceive to be true maybe aren't quite, right? Maybe there are things that we can't see. And I made a little analogy with my eyeglass case here that, if this was an issue or a problem in society, that really none of us can see the whole problem, right? None of us can really see the whole issue, and what we need are multiple perspectives so that we can understand it. No one of us can see everything, right? Depending on where you stand, depending on your experience and your kind of place in society, you see things from a slightly different angle, right? So it's important to include these perspectives when you're talking about things so that you can actually see the entire issue, right? Not just one side of it. We talked a little bit yesterday too about this critical theory thing, and critical theory was kind of the idea that sometimes things that are true or true or factual sometimes challenge our common sense. Sometimes they're not what we think they would be. And we also talked about the idea that knowledge isn't free of social and political meaning. And so a lot of the things that we know and the fact that we know them in the first place has to do with social and political values. And we should probably state right now that, education is a political project, right? So here we are sitting in a class, and who tells me what to teach? Who tells me what to teach in here? Huh? Social? So, yeah, but who told me to teach that? Mm. Yes, the government. So the BC government has a Ministry of Education, and they've created a curriculum, and they've handed it to me and said, "Do this," right? And I'm required to do this. Although, to be honest, I have a lot of flexibility in terms of what I talk about. So there's, I can, to some degree, do what I want. But the government does tell me, to some degree, what to teach.
So you mean you can choose, right?
I can choose a few things. So a lot of the things that we talked about in the syllabus, like the sort of the core competencies, those skills and the curricular competencies, those are given to me. But the specific things that the government didn't tell me to talk about critical theory, for instance. I just decided that that was important, and so here it is. So I have some kind of, parameters. I have some boundaries around what I'm supposed to do, but I can also, to some degree, I can do a little bit of what I want, which is kind of nice, actually. So the government tells me what to teach. And so if you take Social Studies 11, you will probably, actually, I forget what the curriculum is now because it's changed. I haven't taught it in a year or two. Anyway, in the past, in Social Studies 11, I have taught students about democracy in Canada and how democracy works and how the Canadian government works. And why did I teach them that? Well, because the government wants you to be good democratic citizens, right? They want you to know how the system works, and they want you to participate, right? They didn't tell me to teach students about communism and how to be good communists, right? Or how to be good fascists, or how to overthrow the government, because the government doesn't want any of those things, right? The government wants you to be good democratic citizens, right? And so the things that I teach help to achieve that goal. And so, and again, that's not, I don't think that's a bad thing. I'm not criticizing it. I'm just saying that education is a political project, and it is tied to who has political power. And of course, if we were living in a communist country now, I would be teaching you all how to be good communists, right? Because that's what the government would want of me. So information has meaning attached to it. Political, social meaning, and sometimes the pieces of a story that are told and taught and the pieces that are avoided also have to do with political power, right? And the story of Christopher Columbus, of course, taught us that very thing, right? We said that there's one side of Christopher Columbus's story that he's a brave explorer, he sails off and discovers the new world and is kind of a founding father for Canada and the US and arguably all of the countries in North and South America. But there's another side to that story too, right? He set in motion the destruction of indigenous cultures in North and South America and the taking of their land. He ushered in a period of death and destruction for these cultures. Historical accounts suggest that he was actually a pretty awful guy just on his own, never mind the effect of his quote-unquote discovery. And so we have kind of two sides to the story here. The brave hero explorer, the founding father, and the awful guy who sets in motion the destruction of indigenous cultures and the sort of beginning of the Atlantic slave trade, and two stories, right? Two different stories. All of them contain factual information, right? These are all true. These pieces of the story are all true. But again, the pieces of the story that get selected and get passed on have a lot to do with political power. And so lots of school kids in the past, and maybe even in the present, I don't know. I think the Americans are more interested in Columbus than Canada is, but the story that school children get taught is the brave hero, right? The explorer. That's the story that gets taught because, again, it supports the fact that European people hold the power in the US and in North America. And again, that wasn't always the case, but But it's true now, and it supports that. It supports that power, right? It validates that power. But of course, Indigenous people see Columbus quite differently, right? But again, this is another example of how knowledge is socially constructed, right? There's a lot of facts about Christopher Columbus. There's a lot of historical record about him, but we build a story, right? And we give that story meaning. And so for the Americans, not all Americans, but for some Americans, yeah, Columbus is a hero, and they celebrate him, or maybe some people just like having a day off, which is probably true. But the fact that his story has been built as one of a hero, people see him that way. But again, how you see him depends on who you are and what your experience has been. And it also depends on who is teaching you about him. Okay, and so if the government's teaching you about him, the story the government wants you to know is brave explorer. Although that is starting to change, and we're starting to look at Columbus and arguably a lot of historical figures in a more kind of a more objective way, I suppose. Has anyone been paying attention, or has anyone heard about the protests and discussion that's happened around monuments, around statues in the United States, statues of Confederate generals?
Yeah, they're taking it down because they're like slave owners or something.
Yeah. It's a very similar, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, but very similar situation to this. So if you know anything about your American history, you'll know that in the kind of mid-1800s, the US had a civil war, which hopefully they aren't on the brink of right now, but they had a civil war, and so the northern states went to war with the southern states. And one of the things that they were fighting about is that the southern states wanted the right to keep slaves to work on their farms and plantations. And the northern states said, no, that's wrong, we shouldn't be doing that anymore, slavery should be ended, slavery should be abolished. And the South felt so strongly about that they actually had a war. The North won, and they abolished slavery. But in the southern United States, there are still a lot of monuments, statues to the generals that fought for the southern states, the generals that fought to preserve slavery. And so there's been a lot of heated discussion about what should be done with those monuments. Should we have a statue in the middle of the city in a park, where you can look up and look into the face of a guy who fought to keep other people as property, right? Is that the message we want to send here in 2020 or 2021? And so a lot of people have had there's been a lot of heated discussion and arguments about that, but actually we'll come back to that a little bit later in the racism unit or chapter, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But it's the same idea, right? The story that we tell about these guys is linked to social and political power. Were they good generals in terms of strategy? They probably were, right? Did they fight bravely? I expect they probably did. Did they fight passionately for their cause? Undoubtedly, right? Was their cause a good one? I would say no. I would say that's awful, right? So again, depending on how you choose your facts and how you build your story, you can convey different meanings, right? Yeah. I thought I was going to say something else about the statues, but it's gone, so I'll just let it go. The other thing that sometimes gets attached to the Christopher Columbus myth is the idea of him proving that the world was round, right? He sailed off and proved the world was round. And again, that's not true. They already knew the world was round by that point. And again, sailing in that direction on a flat Earth is insanity, right? Because if the Earth was flat, he'd just fall off the edge and die. So I think I think people in Europe had some confidence that the world was round, right? However, Europeans like to attach this because it centers science and knowledge as something that comes from Western civilization and Western culture. And often what gets omitted from the story is the idea that lots and lots of people, lots and lots of different cultures already kind of suspected or knew that the world was round prior to that. And so just a few examples: the Greeks, some of the indigenous cultures from Central America and South America, the Maya, the Inca, the Aztec, indigenous people in North America thought of the world as round. There were places in kind of the Middle East and Asia where they were already kind of looking and thinking about a round Earth. So again, you know, the Europeans weren't the first ones to figure this out, and arguably they were very late to that party. But still, we like to tell the story because European civilization likes to see itself as the creator of knowledge, right? European knowledge is legitimate, and all of those other cultures are just, it's all magic and hocus pocus, right? So, but again, that knowledge has meaning, right? Even if it's incorrect. So sometimes we have to think of when we learn things like this, or when we hear stories, sometimes it's important to question, well, who's going to benefit from this story, right? If I believe the Columbus story of the brave explorer who discovers the new world, if I believe that story, then who benefits from that, right? What group benefits from me believing that? And whose lives are going to be limited by that belief? Whose perspectives and feelings about this event are going to be kind of pushed aside, right? And I think we kind of, in this case, we all pretty clearly know it's kind of white European power is kind of supported by that narrative, by that story. And indigenous people, their voices are kind of pushed aside and silenced, right? And again, they have quite a different experience of Christopher Columbus and all of the things that came from his discovery, right? Okay. Oh, good. We're here. Before we move on, is everyone okay with what we've talked about yesterday and just kind of reviewed today or finished up? It's a little bit, I understand it's a little bit difficult and it's a little bit abstract. And that's okay. Again, we just wanted to kind of dip into that a little bit. Just take a little sip of critical theory so that we have an understanding of, you know, facts are facts, right? Historical facts are factual, but their meaning and how they're chained together and what we know and what we don't is very much connected to social and political power. Cool? Cool? Okay. Okay. So we'll switch gears here a little bit and we'll talk about one of the skills that we want to pay attention to here in Social Justice 12 and arguably just in life in general, and that's critical thinking. I'm sure you've heard this term before, yes? Yeah? What do you think of when I say critical thinking? What is it to think critically? Oh, to think outside of the box, right? So that's a little kind of cliche analogy thing, right? So you want to think outside of your regular pattern of thinking, I guess, right? What else? To question everything, or to question maybe things that you just assume, right? You assume to be true, or you might just take for granted as being true. To question those things, right? Question everything. What else? Question everything. Think outside the box. What else? What else? What else? Must be other pieces to this. Well, should we just jump into it? Seeing as the audience has gone quiet. Okay, let's talk a little bit. So this is kind of how I start critical thinking and how I frame it. So critical thinking is about your beliefs, right? So not necessarily like, religious beliefs or something, but the things that you believe to be true, right? And we all have them, right? We all have things that we believe to be true and correct. And those beliefs are actually important because they help guide us through our lives. They help us make decisions. A quick show of hands, who would like to go on to some form of like university or college after they're done their secondary here at Columbia College? Who's going to go on to something else? University, college, something else? Yeah, right? Now, why on earth would you do that? You've all been in school for 12 years, 11, 12, 13 years, something like that. Why on earth would you do more school? Aren't you tired of school yet? Do you just love it so much that you want more and more? Why would you go to college or university after this?
Because it's important, like everyone has said.
Okay, people tell you it's important, right? Why is it important?
To increase our knowledge.
To increase your knowledge? Why would you need to increase your knowledge? 12 years of school. How much more do you need to know?
You have a better standing in society.
You have a better standing in society, okay. What else?
Having the youthful job.
Yeah, it will help you get a job or sort of enter the career that you would like to enter. What else?
Because getting a degree is seen as successful in society.
Yeah, there's a certain amount of credibility you have if you have a degree or if you have a degree from somewhere. That's gives you a certain amount of standing. Anything else? Okay, so those are all true, right? And well, I don't know if they're true. They're all beliefs that we hold, right? And so many students, many young people finish their secondary, finish their high school career, and then they move on to college or university or some such thing. And of course they do it because, like you said, they hold some beliefs, right? And the belief is that, yeah, this is going to help me get a job, right? This is going to help me enter my career. This is going to help me make more money over the course of my life, right? This is going to give me a better life, right? I'm going to have a better quality of life. That, if I get into this career, whatever career I'm thinking of inserting myself into, then that'll make me happy, right? I'll have a good life as a result, right? These are all kind of beliefs and hopes and aspirations that are tied up in this decision to go to college or go to university, right? We all hold these beliefs. Society holds these beliefs. Your parents, I suspect, hold these beliefs, right? And to some degree, so do you. And that's fine. I'm not challenging any of that. But I am saying that based on those beliefs, you're going to make a decision to go to a college or a university, right? Those beliefs will motivate you to do that thing, right? So our beliefs are important because they influence our choices and they influence our behavior. And so it's probably a good idea, I would think, if we make sure that the beliefs that we have are actually true, actually worth believing, right? So if there was, if going to college would, ultimately ruin your life, then you should probably know that ahead of time, right? You shouldn't, if you simply believe that it's going to be good, and it will ruin your life, you'll be unpleasantly surprised, right? So we have to make sure that the things that we believe, the ideas that we hold to be true, are actually reasonable, right? Are actually worth believing, and that will kind of guide us instead of sending us down the wrong path. And again, I'm just using the school thing as an example. I'm not saying that in fact it is, wrong or should be challenged. In fact, I think it's pretty well established that, if you go on to further education and training, you will have more career options, you'll have more standing in society, and you will make more money, right? That's pretty clear. The data show that. So I'm not challenging that belief. Just an example. But again, we should have some tools to determine which beliefs are good and should inform us. Hey, good morning. And which ones are actually going to cause problems. Good morning. Right. So critical thinking, we're asking ourselves, are the things we believe actually worth believing, right? And the things that are worth believing will have good reasons, right? We should be able to find good reasons to accept that belief. And the better those reasons are, the more kind of comfortable that we can feel that that belief is true, right? And sometimes we can't know for sure, right? Sometimes we can't absolutely know that something is correct or true, right? We don't know that if Daniel goes on to university, we don't know if that's going to make him successful and happy and allow him to make lots of money, right? We don't know that for sure. Sorry, Daniel. We don't know that for sure, right? We can't see into Daniel's future. But there are lots of good reasons to believe that is true, right? There's lots of data to suggest that college graduates make much more over their lives than high school graduates do. We know that lots of careers and programs require degrees and training in order to get a job in. We know that. And we can probably guess that if Daniel's able to enter the career of his choice, if he makes a good choice, then hopefully that will make him happy and satisfied in his life, right? So even though we don't know for sure what's going to happen to Daniel in the future, we have some pretty good reasons to suggest that if he goes on to college or university, if he makes a good choice that's kind of in alignment with what he wants and who he is, that things will kind of turn out well for him, right? We have some good evidence to believe that, right? So the better the reasons are and the more evidence we have, the more likely that thing is to be true, right? And so again, the idea that Daniel's life will be improved by some college or university after high school, I think that's worth believing, right? There's some good evidence, there's some good reasons to believe that that's the case, even though we can never really know for sure, right? So, ground level critical thinking has to do with statements or has to do with claims. Have you ever heard the word claim before? It has a few different meanings, right? You can claim something as in you can pick it up or get it, right? So if I left this and it wound up in the lost and found, I might go to the security desk and claim it, right? I can get it back. There can also be insurance claims, right? So if you need to use your insurance, then you make a claim. But here in critical thinking, claims are something that something says, okay, hang on. Something that someone says is true or is the case, right? A claim. So I might claim that, going to college or university after high school, will benefit your life in a number of different ways. That's a claim, right? I'm saying that something is true. I'm saying if you don't come to class, if you always sleep in and you don't attend, your grades are probably going to suffer, right? That's another claim. So when people make claims, they're saying something is the case. They're saying something is or is not true, right? So that's kind of the ground level is a claim. And claims are statements, right? So you've probably heard, maybe you've heard about this in English class before, and a statement, yeah, it says something is or is not the case. I feel like I'm missing a slide or two here, but that's okay. Questions are not claims, right? So, is there a God? That's not a claim, right? It's a question. There is a God, that's a statement, that's a claim. Or there is no God is similarly a statement or a claim, right? So we can't really start thinking critically about questions necessarily, where we need to think critically about statements. So people saying something is a certain way or isn't a certain way, right? There was massive voter fraud in the last election in the United States. That is a claim, right? That is a claim that someone has, well, not someone, multiple people have made based on the original claim made by one particular person that in 5 more days we will never speak of again. No, we'll probably speak of him more. But that is a claim that has been made, right? So what we're looking for right off the bat is statements. People saying something is or is not the case, right? And what we want to do is look for, or if we're making our own arguments, we want to build a series of statements that kind of fit together into an argument. And so when I talk about arguments here, I'm not talking about a fight necessarily, right? This is not an argument you have with your siblings or your parents necessarily. And it doesn't have to even be, it's not really a negative thing, right? Sometimes when we talk about arguments in regular life, they're kind of they have a negative connotation, right? Oh, I had an argument with my parents last night and it was awful. And well, we're not thinking about that type of argument. We're talking about a series of statements that suggest something is true or suggest something is the case, and then the reasons and the evidence that support that original statement. That's what we're talking about. So arguments in this context they're not bad, they're not negative, and I'm going to argue that they're a very important skill for us to learn and to pay attention to, not just in this class, but in other classes, and not just in other classes, but in life in general, okay? So if you think about it, lots of people use arguments in their careers and their lives all the time, right? So any academic, so any professor at a college or whatever, they're constantly making arguments, right? They're trying to say, I've done a bunch of experiments, I've poured things into test tubes and measured temperatures and taken notes, and based on my research, I think this is true, right? And why do I think this is true? Well, because of these reasons, and because of my experiments and all of my data that I've collected, right? Every scientific paper, every academic paper is an argument. It's saying something is a certain way, and here's why, and I think you should believe it. That's what every academic journal article is that, right? And it doesn't matter if it's chemistry or physics or history or genetics or whatever, political science, doesn't matter. All academic papers are doing that. They're saying, I've done some research, this is what I think is true, and here's why. Every paper is like that. Of course, it's much more complicated, but at its very basic level, that's what academics and scientists are doing all day long. They're making arguments about things that they believe are true, right, based on their evidence. Lawyers do this all the time, right? This is a lawyer's job, to build arguments, right? No, Your Honor, my client couldn't have killed this person, and here's why, right? And that's an important argument to make, right? Because if it's not a good argument, dude's going to jail, right? So lawyers have the responsibility to make good arguments all the time, right? That is their job, is to put together arguments, or if you're the prosecution, to pull apart the defense's argument at the same time, right? So the prosecution will say, yes, this guy did commit the murder, and here's why. And also, the defense, no, their argument is wrong. Their argument is not valid, and here's why too, right? So you have you have two lawyers with an argument trying to prove their argument and pull apart the other guys, right? That's exactly what's happening. Does anyone like watching kind of like courtroom dramas and law shows and things like that? Does anyone kind of enjoy those a little bit? Yeah. That's exactly what's happening, is that both sides, the defense and the prosecution, they have created arguments and they're trying to get the jury or the judge to believe them, right? That's their whole job. If you want a raise, if you're working at a job later on and you want more money, you can't just walk into the boss's office and say, hey, I want more money. Well, you can. You can try that. Probably won't end well for you, but you can do it. But really what you need is an argument. Hey, Mr. Boss person, I would like a raise. I would like to make more money, and here's why, right? Here's why I'm worth it. Here's why you should give me more money, right? If you have an argument, it's going to go much better for you. The boss may not agree with you, but you have supporting reasons for I want more money, right? And just I want more money is like not useful. We all want more money, right? Do you all want more money? I do. Even though I'm very happy with my paycheck, I'm perfectly well paid. I'm very happy, but there's never enough, right? There's never enough money. So arguments are important, I think, for anything that you might do, for politicians, for lawyers, for people working in companies who just want to make more money, for academics, for school. This is an important skill, I think. I'm not alone either. So, this is what we'll say an argument is. An argument for our purposes is a group of statements, right? A group of claims, a group of things that someone might say to be true that kind of support each other in a particular way. So we'll have a conclusion, the main thing that someone is trying to convince you of, and then we'll have premises, right? Reasons or things that are also said to be true that support that conclusion, okay? So we have a primary claim, a conclusion, and then we have some premises, things that support that conclusion. Good so far? Okay. Right. I'm going to create an argument here. It's going to be a very simple one. Here's my argument. My argument is that I think all of you should drink coffee. You should all be coffee drinkers. That is my claim, right? That drinking coffee would be a good thing for you all to do. Now, I don't believe that. This is a fake argument. I'm not pushing coffee on you, but just an example. So I think it'd be a good thing if all of you drank coffee, okay? Now, as good critical thinkers, you should immediately ask me, well, why, right? Why do you say that? Why should I be drinking this slightly odd tasting brown liquid? Why should I drink this thing? So if I was building a good argument, I would give you some reasons to believe that, right? Some premises. So I'm going to give you 3. I'm going to say that you should drink coffee. Coffee is a good thing for you to drink because it is delicious. First premise. Because it is inexpensive. Second premise. And because it will stimulate your brain and help you to pay attention and study and get better grades. Cool? Okay, so that's a very simple argument, right? 3 premises that I built, and they are meant to hopefully convince you that you should drink coffee. Drinking coffee is a good thing. So, what's my next slide here? Yes. So there is that actually looks really good, doesn't it? Right, so here's my very simple argument that I built. You should all drink coffee. Drinking coffee is a good thing for you. It's delicious, it's inexpensive, and it will help stimulate your brain and help you to study and get better grades. So the first thing that we should do is, okay, we have an argument here that I presented to you. Let's analyze it. Let's see if this is actually worth believing or not. Let's see if I've made a good argument. So the first thing we want to look at is, do the premises logically support the conclusion? So in other words, in this case, in this argument, are these reasons why someone might want to drink coffee? Okay? So let's start with the first one. You all should drink coffee because it's delicious. Now, is that a logical reason why you might want to drink something?
No.
You wouldn't want to drink something because it's delicious?
I mean, like, everyone's taste is different.
Everyone's taste is different. That is true, and we will get to that. But would you drink something if you liked the taste of it?
It could be a very good motivator, but it's not so, it's the main reason for water.
It's true. I'm not saying it's the main reason. I'm not saying it's the only reason. I'm just saying if you thought a drink was delicious, is that a reason to drink it? Yeah. What's a thing that you like to drink besides water, Daniel? Coke?
Coke, coffee.
Okay. Coke or coffee. Nasser, what do you like? Milkshakes? Good one. Cheyenne? What's that?
Green tea.
Green tea. Okay. Good. So, and there's probably a number of reasons why you might drink them, but I assume that one of those reasons is that you like the taste, right? Right? Definitely with milkshakes, right? So, yeah. So, is this logical support? It is, right? Someone might choose to drink something because it's delicious. I like the taste of coffee, and that's one of the reasons why. It might be the only reason why I drink it, but that's a logical support, right? Again, this premise doesn't have to be bulletproof. It doesn't have to work for all situations. It just has to be logical. And is it logical? Yeah, right? You might drink this, you might choose to drink something because you like the taste. Premise number 2, it is inexpensive. Is that a reason why someone might choose to drink something? Because it's inexpensive. Is that logical support? Yeah. Might someone, let's look at the opposite. Might someone choose not to drink something because it's expensive? Yeah, right? If this coffee, I made this at home, but if it cost me $40 to make this much coffee, would I be drinking it every day? Nope. What's that? Depending on who you are. Well, depending on who I am, my salary does not allow me to drink $40 drinks every day, right? So I would not be drinking this if it cost me $40 every day, right? So maybe you wouldn't just drink something because it's cheap, but it is a reason why you would be able to drink something, right? And so having a coffee, it's $2 probably at Tim Hortons, but I can probably make it for a fraction of that at home. That's reasonably inexpensive, right? So can I drink that? Can I drink this coffee because it's inexpensive? Yeah, right? I can afford to. So again, it's not the only reason why someone might drink it, but it's a logical reason, I think. What about the third one here? It will stimulate your brain, help you study, and result in better grades. Is that a reason why someone might drink coffee?
Yes.
Yeah. And in fact, for some people, it's the only reason they drink it, right? They need to stay awake, or they need a little pick-me-up, right, to stay alert. So is that logical support for my conclusion? Is that a reason why someone might drink coffee? Absolutely, right? And some of us may have actually had a cup of coffee for that very reason, because they need to sharpen up their brain a little bit, stay perky, stay awake. So, can we agree that in this argument we have 3 premises that logically support the conclusion? Okay, I'm going to add a fourth premise. Okay, so here's my argument now. I think you should all drink coffee. I think that would be a good thing. And I think you should drink coffee because it's delicious, because it's inexpensive, because it will stimulate your brain and help you study and get better grades, and because the beans come from Colombia. Now, does that premise logically support the conclusion? No? Why not? What's that? Well, it could be true. Some of the beans come from Colombia. Some of them come from other parts of the world. So it's a reasonably true premise, right? But is it a logical support for this conclusion? Is it a reason why someone might drink coffee? Because the beans come from Colombia? Probably not, right? Maybe if you were Colombian, right, and it was like a little bit of like Colombian pride, I only drink Colombian beans. Maybe. But for the most people, do they drink coffee because the beans come from Colombia? No, it doesn't make any sense. That's not a reason why someone might drink coffee, right? So again, it's not a very good premise. Is it true? Yeah, it might very well be true. I know the beans are kind of grown in various different countries. Colombia is kind of the stereotypical country in which coffee is grown. But even if that premise is true, this is not good support for this conclusion, right? People don't drink coffee because the beans come from this country or that country. It's not a reason why people drink coffee. So it's not very good support for this argument, even if it is true. Make sense? So let's get rid of that. That's a bad premise. Let's chuck it. Let's stick with these three. Now, I've kind of led into this already, but the second thing we want to make sure is, are these premises true? Or, if they're not obviously true, could I prove them to you? Could I do some work and give you some evidence? Okay, so are the premises true? So here, you should all drink coffee because it's delicious. Is that true? Is that a true premise? Don't think so? What do you think? Definitely does, right? Taste is a personal kind of thing. It's a personal choice. Some people obviously find coffee delicious. Some people find it disgusting. Some people just don't care for it one way or the other. It's a bit of a personal choice. So if I wanted to try to prove that premise to you, what could I do? How could I try and prove to you that coffee is delicious?
Make samples.
Okay, I could bring my coffee maker in here and brew some coffee and give it all to you and say, look how delicious this is, right? Would everyone find it delicious? Hard to know, right? Maybe, maybe not. I'm sure some people would, right? But that's one way in which I could try to demonstrate that this is true. What else could I do? How else could I try to prove that coffee is delicious? Maybe not for you in general, but for people in general.
Okay, someone else, like do a survey.
Sure, I could do a survey. Maybe I could, do a little doodle poll and I could send it out to all the students at Columbia College. And I could say, hey, Columbia College students, we're doing a little experiment. Do you think coffee is delicious or not? Yes or no? And then we could get the results of that survey. And maybe we would see that, I don't know, maybe 70 or 80% of students would think coffee is delicious, or maybe less. I don't know. Depending on the results of that, though, that might be some evidence, right? Some evidence that many people find coffee delicious, at least.
We can say the benefits of coffee.
We can't. I'm going to press pause on that because I'd like to come back to that idea. So hold on to that, and we'll come back to it because that's another piece of it. Okay. Let's look at number 2. So coffee is inexpensive. Is that true? Is that true? Yeah? Yeah? That one, I think we mentioned a little bit earlier, that might depend a little bit on who you are, right? If you were a homeless person living on the street, yeah, it might be pretty expensive to drink a cup of coffee every day if you have next to no money, right? If you're a person who's working and making good money, yeah, maybe coffee's not that expensive, right? Maybe, maybe you can make it at home and it's cheaper that way. But can we say that coffee is inexpensive, maybe for most people? Could I prove that to you? Could I generate some data to support that? Yeah, what could I do?
Bring some prices like from the different locations in the map, and like compare it to like average of the income of the persons like they live in that area. Sort of things.
Sure, I could figure out how much coffee costs, maybe to make at home or to buy at Tim Hortons or Starbucks or JJ Bean or wherever. And then I could kind of put it in the context of how much money people make on average. And I could say, look, pennies, right? Cost barely anything, right? And I could even compare it to other drinks maybe, right? I could figure out, well, 500 milliliters of coffee costs this much, whereas 500 milliliters of Coca-Cola costs this much, and 500 milliliters of milkshake costs this much, and green tea. And I could maybe make a little bar graph for you if I got really excited about it. And I could show you that, yeah, maybe this is how coffee compares to other beverages, right? So I'm not sure how that would come out, but I could generate some data and I could probably show you that coffee is inexpensive. What about the last one here? Coffee will stimulate your brain and help you study and get better grades. Is that true?
Yes.
Is it?
Probably.
Probably? How do you know it's true?
The first part is true, but the last part is not necessarily true.
Interesting. So I've made, in a way, I've made two claims here, right? I've kind of smushed them into one premise. I've said that it will stimulate your brain and that it will get you better grades. And so one of those is pretty clearly established, right? The other one, maybe not, right? What could I do to maybe prove to you that that is true?
I can get coffee for next 19 days in this semester. Then I can compare it to my last semester that I didn't drink coffee. After that, if I didn't get better grades, I can make a claim on you. If I did, you can prove your argument to me.
Okay. So, well, and in effectively what you're saying is we could run an experiment, right? Or the fact that you're actually involved in one already. So you're running an experiment right now, right? Coffee versus none. How do I do better with coffee or not, right? So yeah, we could run an experiment, right? We could run Cheyenne's experiment. We could, before a quiz, I could bring in coffee for half the class and say, okay, drink this and then do your quiz, and then the other half just do your quiz and see what happens. It's not very scientific, right? It's a pretty small group, but we could run some sort of experiment and see what the results are. Certainly that's how scientists would do it. Do you think scientists might have already tried something like this? Sure, right? Maybe we could look up some research and see if researchers have looked at, the effects of coffee and caffeine consumption, and does it improve test performance for students? Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. I'm assuming it does, but I actually haven't looked it up. So I could dig into the research, right? And I could maybe show you some scientific journal papers that say, look, it actually works. People score better on their assessments when they've had some coffee, maybe, right? So if we're not sure if this one's true, I could do some research and probably prove it to you, right? If the data is out there, if the research is out there, I could probably prove that to you, right? Yeah, okay. Let's just assume that I could. So, do I have a reasonable argument here? Yeah, I think so. It's a pretty simple one. Again, it's not bulletproof, and very few arguments are bulletproof, but you all should drink coffee because it's delicious, logical, and I could probably show you that it's somewhat true. Because it's inexpensive, also logical support, and I could probably demonstrate that as well. And because it'll stimulate your brain and help you study. Logical support for the conclusion, and I might be able to demonstrate that one is true with a little bit of digging or experimentation, right? Okay, so that's a good argument. Does that mean that you should believe it? No, not necessarily. That's what I'd like to talk about next, but I think I'll give you a break first because we've been working hard for about an hour here. So take 10, come back, and then we'll talk about whether or not we should believe this argument or not. Okay? All right. All right, and we're back. So, of course, we were talking about critical thinking, examining whether the things that we believe or the things that other people are asking you to believe, should we believe them? Are they good things to believe? And so, as an example here, I made a very simple argument about coffee, saying that you should all drink it and it's good to drink it because it's delicious and inexpensive and helps stimulate your brain and help you get better grades, right? And we walked through this argument, and I think we agreed that my conclusions are logical, right? There are reasons why someone might drink coffee or might agree that you should drink coffee. And they're also true or mostly true, or I think we can imagine a way in which I could prove them to you, right? I could prove this premise to you. So this is a decent argument. And just before we had a break, I said, okay, well then, should we believe it? And some people immediately said no. And so why not? Why might you not agree with this argument?
Well, I mean, like, not everyone can. Well, there's something called like, I don't know, addictive substances, like coffees.
Yeah.
So that it's basically not good for minors.
Okay. So caffeine is technically a drug, right? It is a socially acceptable drug, right? I couldn't sit up here and snort cocaine in front of a class. That's not socially acceptable nor legal, nor do I want to. Just for your information, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. But this is a socially acceptable drug, right? And so number one, some of you, I might be making this argument to, are minors, right? You are under 18 or under 19, depending on where you think minors go. So why should minors not consume this liquid, this beverage? Not sure. Some people don't think it's a good idea, right? But again, that's kind of another mini argument, right? Minors shouldn't drink coffee. Well, why not? So hopefully there are some reasons to back those up. I don't really know what all of them are, but there might be. Might there be an issue with caffeine being a drug? What if my religion forbids me from consuming any drugs or alcohol? Will I drink this? No, I won't, right? And actually, if you've heard of Mormons, they're kind of a Christian, a branch of Christianity. Mormons are prohibited from consuming any drugs or alcohol as a religious rule. So I could make this argument to a Mormon, but would a Mormon say, okay, I'll drink coffee? No, right? Because I haven't really addressed the religious piece of this, and so that might override it. So I might make this argument to a Mormon, and the Mormon might say, yeah, that you've made a good logical argument here, Mike, but unfortunately my religion forbids me from consuming it, and so I won't be doing that, right? So there's other considerations, and I'm going to unpause you now. So what did you want to add before? Right, so there might be benefits or there might be harms that I haven't discussed, right? Are there health effects to do with coffee? Probably, right? I haven't talked about health at all, right? It might be good for our health, right? Coffee might have positive outcomes for our health. It also might have negative ones. And if I care about my health, which I do, I should probably know those, right? And my argument doesn't address health at all, right? So there's nothing in my argument about health effects, positive or negative. There's nothing in my argument about maybe religious prohibitions. There's nothing in my argument about its effect on minors, on people who are under 18 or maybe who are still kind of growing and developing. So could you take issue with my argument? Sure, right? Like I said, it's not bulletproof. And lots of arguments are not bulletproof. But, sorry, I just lost my train of thought here. Lots of them aren't bulletproof, but that's okay, right? I can still make a logical argument, and it can be okay. But of course, people can take issue with that argument as well. Just because I have a valid argument that has logical premises and premises that are mostly true, it doesn't mean that the argument is perfect, and it doesn't mean that everyone should accept it either, right? Because sometimes there are overriding factors, right? My religious beliefs might be an overriding factor, right? Yeah, all of these this is a great argument, but as a Mormon, or maybe with other religious groups, I'm not sure, I just cannot consume caffeine, and so I can't drink it, right? Maybe decaf. But of course, if it's not caffeinated, that gets rid of that third premise, right? Because it won't really stimulate your brain. And Nazra's looking at me like, decaf? What's that about? Ryan here, Ryan here mentions caffeine is addictive, and too much caffeine isn't good for health, right? So some people have suggested there is an addictive quality to caffeine and to coffee, and some people might not like the idea of that, right? Some people might not like the idea that they might become addicted to this substance, even though, it's a reasonably harmless substance, right? It's not cocaine or heroin, but some people might be concerned about that and might not like the idea of being addicted to any substance, and that's fair, right? That's a fair position to take, right? Sarah here says, yes, absolutely, but don't drink it too much because it'll have bad, what does it say here? Bad side for, yeah, so again, we haven't talked anything about health effects, positive or negative. I guess if there were positive health effects, I could have included them as a premise, right? But if there's negative ones, people might look at my argument and say, hey, there are these negative effects on your health and you haven't mentioned those, right? What about that? Why should I be drinking coffee when, it will do this to my health? So Ryan says, day by day, you'll need more coffee to keep you active. You don't want people consuming more and more and more coffee. That might be even worse for their health, although I've been pretty steady with my coffee intake for a long time, but even so, people may be concerned. Let me just see what my next slide here. Okay, so we've done that. Oh, yeah. Gotcha. So that's kind of what we want to do in terms of assessing arguments. We want to see that all of the premises are, clear statements, clear claims, as is the conclusion. Do they logically support the conclusion? Are they reasons why we should believe it? And then, are they actually true? And so, again, to circle back to Donald Trump, again, when he says this election was stolen, there was massive voter fraud, that's a claim, right? Trump is making a claim that something happened, that something is true, that something is the case. Now, what are his premises? What are his reasons for believing, for us believing that claim? Does he have any? No. He's made a claim, the election was stolen, there was massive voter fraud, but there's no support, right? There's no premises, there's no supporting evidence. And in fact, people have examined the election results and found exactly the opposite. In fact, there's really no voter fraud. The election was not stolen. It's a perfectly secure, legitimate election, and the outcome is correct. The counts are correct. Nothing strange happened. Everybody did their job. There's nothing here, right? So, but yet he keeps repeating the claim over and over and over again, which actually, unfortunately for him or unfortunately for us, is a good strategy, because the way the human brain works, the more often you repeat something, the easier people believe it. The more likely people will actually accept it and believe it to be true. So he keeps repeating it, but it's actually working, unfortunately. People do think it's true. But as critical thinkers, we should say you have no evidence, right? There's no reason to believe that that is the case. Find some evidence and we'll talk. But there isn't any, right? Okay, here's what I'd like to ask you to do now. Take a minute or two, and I'll put a couple minutes on the clock here, and take a minute or two, and I'd like you to create an argument of your own. Okay, very simple one, just like the coffee one, nothing major. Can be about anything. Can be about food or movies or whatever. Any topic you choose, create an argument. Maybe 2 premises or 3 if you can come up with them. And again, try to make sure that those premises are logical support for your conclusion and that they are true, or that you could prove that they are true if you can. Okay? So I'll give you 2 minutes. Try to come up with a simple argument of your own. Again, it doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be super sophisticated. I think we can agree that my coffee one is pretty simple and unexciting. Doesn't have to be huge, it just has to be a valid argument. So 2 minutes, try and come up with your own argument, okay? Conclusion and maybe a couple of premises. Okay. I'm eager to hear some arguments and some premises to support them. So let's try this out. Let's see how it goes. Give me an argument. Make an argument to me. Yeah.
Apple is better than Android.
Okay. So Apple phones or software, whatever. Apple makes a better phone than Android, right? Or the operating system's better, whatever. Okay, Apple's better than Android. Good, nice claim. Why should we believe that?
Security is better.
Okay, so the security on Apple devices is better than it is on Android. Premise number 1. What's number 2?
It's much more smoother. How about the designs look more attractive?
Okay, so it's visually more pleasing to look at. Okay. Got a third one, maybe? Define better. Like more, like is it maybe it's more intuitive? Like it's easier to use? I don't know. I don't really know Android phones very well. You just assumed, okay. So maybe this isn't a good argument, but that's okay. So the claim here is that Apple is superior to Android, right? Great. Why should we believe that? Well, it's more attractive to look at, it's more enjoyable to look at, and because we spend all day looking at our phones, then it might be nice to look at something enjoyable, so okay. Is that logical support? Yeah, right? You might prefer something because it is more enjoyable to look at. I think that's okay. Your first premise was that the security is better, right? So might that be a reason why Apple could be superior to Android? Yeah, right. If the security is better, that might make it a better phone. Are those things true? Is it nicer to look at? Maybe. It's a bit of an opinion question, right? But we could probably do a survey on that too. We could probably establish that. It's a little. We'd have to see how that one came out, but we could try. The security is better. Is that true? Think it is? Yeah. We might have to do a little bit of research to prove it, but let's just say that the research is there and we found it. Okay, so yeah, so that works too. We could demonstrate that that one's true as well. So is that a good little argument? Absolutely, right? Are there other considerations? Sure, but again, we're just, training wheels right now. Perfectly good little argument. Let me go to, so Shania's got one here. Her conclusion is that teenagers should read books, right? So that's her claim. Teenagers should read books, or maybe read more books, okay? Good, I like it. That's a good, clear statement of what we should believe. Now, we should ask Shania next, of course, why should we believe that, Shania? Why should teenagers be reading more books? And so our premise here is this. It helps develop vocabulary, right? So it helps you learn and use new words, all right? It provides loads of information, right? So it helps you kind of learn new things or put together new information. And it helps you to explore new ideas, right? It might expose you to new perspectives. Okay. So, developing vocabulary, is that logical support for conclusion? Might someone read to develop their vocabulary? Yeah, and in fact, a lot of people learning English, their instructors will encourage them to read things in English, right? It'll help build your vocabulary. So is it logical support? Yeah. Is it true? Yeah, it's true. But reading helps develop your vocabulary at any stage of learning. Might people read to obtain information? Yeah, right? People read the newspaper every day for that very reason, right? They're trying to get information about the world. So is it logical support? Yeah. Is it true? Yeah, you can get lots of information by reading. Does it help you explore new ideas? Might someone read a book because they might want to explore a new idea?
Yes.
Absolutely, right? Is it true? Does reading help you do that? Yeah, of course it does, right? So is this a good argument? Yep, I like it. Again, is it bulletproof? Probably not, but
I have one, like one more.
premise for this?
No, one more conclusion.
Sure,
on express.
sure. What do you got?
Say video games are stressful.
So playing video games is stressful. It causes stress. Okay? All right, that is the claim here. That is the conclusion. Why should we believe that, Scotty?
Well,
When you
I've
play
done-
Heyday, you get stressed.
One sec. Scotty?
some games are competitive.
Okay. So some video games are competitive, and competition causes some degree of stress, right? Because people don't like to lose. It's a minor stress, right? It's not like, but still, it's okay.
Some video games create more stress than
Oh, okay. So, yeah, so video games, playing video games can be a stressful experience. Why should we believe that? Well, because there are competitions, right? And the threat of loss sometimes causes a little bit of stress. Some of the games have some pretty intense scenarios, right? You're in the middle of a war or a battle, or it's a horror context where there's zombies or monsters or scary things. Or what is it, Friday Night at Freddy's? Is that what it is? People still play that?
More to that.
And what?
There's more to just Five Nights at Freddy's.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's creepy though. Ugh. And okay, and do you have one more premise, or is that it? It's okay if you don't, but
I can hardly find one.
okay. Let's just stick with that. So we've got two premises there. Video games can be a stressful experience, right? There's a competition aspect. Is that true for a lot of games? Yeah, you're often trying to win, right? Or at least not die in the process. So there's some sort of competition going on there. Can competitions be stressful? Yeah, they certainly can. So it's a reason why someone might be stressed while playing video games, and there's some truth to that too. Some games are kind of very scary or intense or have lots of violence or horrible things happening in them. Is that true?
Yes.
Yeah, some games are like that, not all of them. Might that cause someone stress? Yeah, if you like play them at home alone in the dark, with surround sound, it might it might freak you out. So I think that's a reasonable argument, right? It's got two premises that are logical support for the conclusion. They are arguably true, and so yeah, I think that's a good little argument. Undoubtedly, not everyone will feel the same kind of stress playing those games, but I think it's a reasonable argument to make. I'm going to go back here. So Ryan says, here's his conclusion. He says that we should all handwrite notes. So I assume this is in class. Students should be writing things down during class. That's his conclusion. And so as good critical thinkers, we should ask, why should we believe that? And here, Rand's got a premise. Well, because it helps memorize things better. It helps put things into your brain more solidly. That's the only premise I have here. Maybe he'll supply another one. Is that a reason why someone might write notes in class to help them learn and memorize better?
Yes.
Sure. Yeah, that's logical support. Is it true? Sometimes it is. Actually, I think there is evidence to suggest that yes, if you are listening and processing and writing things down, that it actually does help your retention and your understanding in class, as long as the professor's not going so fast that you're just like, furiously writing things down just to keep up. As long as that's not happening, I think there is scientific evidence that demonstrates that writing can actually help your retention and your understanding. So yeah, I would say that premise is true, and it's also logical support for the conclusion. So that's a good one as well. One more? Does somebody want to give me one more? Yeah, Cheyenne, what do you got?
Can we talk about like medicals?
Medicals?
Yeah, like medicines.
Okay.
Yeah. You should all like take Adderall before exam or at a study night.
Ah, okay. So the conclusion here is that students should consume or should take Adderall, which is a stimulant medication often prescribed to people with depression. Sometimes.
Anxiety.
Sometimes. What's that?
Anxiety.
Or
Focus.
yeah, Adderall is an ADHD medication, but I think it was originally developed as, an antidepressant, because I think it's an SRI, a serotonin reuptake inhibitor, I think. What's that?
The medicine you're talking about is Ritalin. The actual name is Ritalin.
Mm.
Adderall is like
Oh, the
something
brand.
smoother than that.
Oh, okay. There's a few different types of medication that, were originally, and I don't even know if they were developed as antidepressants. I think they were developed as something else. Then they found use with people suffering depression, and then they also became useful for people, who had attention deficit hyperactivity disorder as it's diagnosed. Okay.
Give you a premise.
What's that?
For example,
Okay.
it's not addictive. I mean, you can't get addicted to this drug because that's like a one-night stand. That's not gonna go more forward. Even your brain gonna reject it after like a week of using it constantly. Second,
Okay, sorry, I'm just going to summarize it because people can't hear you online, so I'm just going to repeat it. So the conclusion is that students should consume Adderall before an exam. Students should consume Adderall before an exam. Why should we believe that? Well, I think the first premise, the implied premise, is that it will help you perform better, right? That's the first premise, that consuming Adderall will help you perform better. Second premise you've said is that it is not an addictive medication. So you're claiming that there's no danger from consuming this. You will not become addicted. There are no side effects. It can be consumed safely. Okay?
and for third one, if you like take the medication and you go to the exam,
Mm-hmm.
you're gonna get the best results at that moment.
Mm.
Because you will have the best performance in your neurons in your head at the moment.
Mm.
It will help and give the minerals to your brain, so they burn the minerals, and like the minerals that doesn't exist in your brain
Mhm.
before taking Adderall, because you can't get those minerals from anywhere else. Or it's so like you should consume like 1 kilogram of some product to get exactly same amount that Adderall gives your mind.
Okay. Could I rephrase that, and could I say that, the benefit here is that, the problem with exams is that they happen when they happen, right? They happen at 8 o'clock on Tuesday morning, and if you happen not to be feeling great that day, or you feel a little bit foggy, which sometimes people do, then you're kind of in trouble, right? You can't take it when you feel best. You just have to take it when it happens. And if you're not having a great day, if you feel sick, or if you, just feel a little off or whatever, it's going to impact your performance. But the consumption of this drug will make sure that you're in the zone, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, you've got everything turned on at the right time, which sometimes is difficult to do on your own, right? Sometimes you're not feeling it, right? Okay, so here we have an argument for the use of Adderall before exams, right? And so the first one is it will help you perform better. Is that logical support? Would somebody take this to perform better? Yeah, that's the whole idea, right? That's why you're taking it. Is that true? Okay, so you're saying there's a lot of academic research that supports the idea that consuming this improves test scores. Okay, true premise. Second one you said was that this is not an addictive substance, so you don't have to worry about negative effects of becoming addicted or anything by using this medication. Is that logical support?
Because it's not a family of opium or like from its last generations,
Mhm.
it's actually a new generation medicine.
Yeah.
So it's completely different from basics. So it won't affect you, like makes you addicted to it.
Right.
After time, your mind will reject it.
Right. So I'm going to turn this premise around just for a second. Might someone not take Adderall if it was addictive? If it was an addictive thing? Yeah. I'd be very I would not be interested if it was an addictive substance, right? So the fact that it is not an addictive substance is that a reason why someone might feel more comfortable taking it?
But you still rely on it, which is somewhat the same thing.
True, but we'll press pause on that and we'll come back to it. But because I think that's logical support, right? People might take it because there's a safety aspect to it, right? It's not addictive, it's not going to harm people, so you say. And so that's a logical support for this conclusion. Is it true? Again, we'd have to see the data, right? We'd have to see the research, but you could demonstrate that to us, that it's a safe substance. The third one was that, because sometimes on the exam day, you might not feel all there, right? You might not feel totally ready, you might feel a little foggy or a little tired, and Adderall can make sure that you are, when the test starts, you've got it's all systems go up here, right? Is that a reason why somebody might consume this medication? Yeah, right? That's logical support. Is that true? Well, yeah. If the medicine works the way that Cheyenne is claiming, it's certainly true that sometimes you're not really ready for an exam. I think we've all had that. You just go in and you're not feeling it, or you're just not thinking very well, and we've all had that happen, I think. So I think that's true, right? That sometimes you're just not in the zone, or you're not feeling ready for the exam, you're feeling a little foggy, and if the drug does what it says that's what you say it does, then that can help that, right? So is that a logical premise? I think it is. Is it true? Again, we'd have to check the data, but I think that one's true as well. So is this, yes?
Is it necessary to have 3 promises for each conclusion?
No. This is kind of a funny thing too, in terms of knowledge being socially constructed and cultural things. 3 is kind of a very significant number, and you'll probably see that everything seems to come in 3. And there's no reason why you should have to have 3 premises. It's a nice little number, right? It's more than 2, it's less than 4. It's kind of it feels good, 3 feels good. You definitely don't need 3 premises for every argument. Some might have less, some might have more. I guess that's it. Have a good weekend, online people. I'll see you tomorrow. We'll pick this up on Monday, okay?